the representative in a position of government is still an individual economic actor themselves. And especially if they have term limits, they're going to get out and do something else afterwards. And especially because there's the position of being a representative, it has limited economic return, but they're regulating industries that have huge economic potential. And they're supposed to largely regulate in a way that decreases some of the economic possibilities that would otherwise be predatory, right? You know, you're not going to dump that pollution there. You have to process it in a more expensive way or whatever it is. And so and kind of no matter what the representative does, half of everybody won't like them and almost nobody will know what they really did when you have a system that becomes this opaque and complicated. So whether they fuck the whole and virtue signal or really authentically serve the people, they'll be kind of equally liked and disliked most of the time. And nobody will really be able to see the accounting. And so how do you actually bind their interests to being a representative of the whole rather than a representative of their own self-interest so that they check the market rather than the market capture the regulatory process that's supposed to check it? The fundamental idea in a liberal democracy is, okay, we're not going to try to have the state run everything the way that a communist structure might. We're going to let the market run things because all the ideas of why we like markets. It's a decentralized system and the supply and demand is kind of a collective intelligence. When there's more desire for something, the demand goes up, which creates a basis for supply to occur emergently. And then the rational actors will choose the best product or service at the best price, like all of that kind of market theory. So we'll let the market do that thing. And it has less total impositional force than a state trying to do it. But we don't do laissez-faire pure market with no state because there will be a market for really bad things. Like we can have a market for organ harvesting and we can have a market for sex trade and whatever kinds of things. And it could be profitable to cut down all the trees and there's no national forest left or kill all the fish or whatever it is. So a lot of law, organized crime, whatever, right? A lot, but it wouldn't be crime. There would be no force checking it other than competing organized crimes. So the idea.
Well, I mean, you could presumably have, law, but with radical economic libertarianism, right? Like you can't hurt other people, the environment being the indirect way to hurt other people. So I suppose if you are making a libertarian, I don't think you're saying that, that there isn't an argument for a different type of libertarian belief in which you protect the commons that are the earth, not the epistemic commons, but the actual logistical, physical commons of our shared mother. And you also protect each other, but also leave everything completely laissez-faire. And I don't know, I'm not advocating that.
When you mention law, the topic of enforcement comes up. So who is the you that could do the thing? And if the enforcement doesn't have asymmetric capacity to those who are violating it, it breaks. So rule of law is based on the concept of a monopoly of violence. And the military force and the police force are the idea of who is a safe holder of a monopoly of violence to be able to institute rule of law. So here, I'm not saying that it's accurate, but the kind of foundational idea, and it's accurate enough that it's worth understanding, the foundational idea of why a liberal democracy of this kind is the market on its own will do some things really well, but some predatory stuff. So you want something to check it. But the thing that checks it has to be more powerful than it or it doesn't work.
Right.
And but then the question is, what is checking it, right? And so in a market, let's say that we even started out T equals 0, everybody has the exact same amount of money. It would never happen that way, but let's pretend that we did. Pretty soon, you'd have a power law distribution of wealth. It just always ends up occurring that way because some people get ahead better because of better capacities, luck, whatever it is. And then those increased financial capacities make it easier to make more money. You make interest on interest, you gain interest on debt, that kind of thing.
Pareto's principle takes over and it gets even more exacerbated.
So when you get a power law distribution of wealth, how do you have anything like representation or justice for these people when these people can put everybody in their employment and like that? Well, the idea is you need something even more powerful than the top of the market, and that's the state. And so we're going to give it monopoly of violence, but it has to be representing the people as a whole. So the commons, the collective, everybody is going to be. So this is why we want a government of, for, and by the people. And that the basis of law, which is the only thing that monopoly of violence will back up, is the collective ethics of the people, right? The values of the people that get to come through some kind of discussion and voting process turn into the basis, or the jurisprudence basis of law itself. The key thing is that the purpose of the state is to check the predatory aspects of the market while leaving the healthy aspects of the market. But that only works if the people check the state. Right. And when you look at the structure of the Constitution, it was largely around how do we make sure that the state doesn't become a runaway thing and that the people actually check it, while giving it enough power that it checks the otherwise predatory aspects of market that would make feudalism again. Because if you don't have a state and you have a power law distribution of wealth, you end up getting something like feudalism. And so this is why George Washington famously said, I'm going to paraphrase, but the number one aim of the federal government is the comprehensive education of every single citizen in the science of government. And it's so huge, right? That was the founding idea, that he was saying that, because he didn't say the number one aim is to institute rule of law. And he didn't say it's to protect the borders, right? Or monetary creation. Because if the number one aim is to protect the borders, it can become a military dictatorship very effectively.
Sure.
If the number one aim is to institute rule of law, it can become an oppressive dictatorship very easily, a police state. The only way it stays a democracy of, for, and by the people is if the number one goal is the comprehensive education of everyone in science of government, was the term of art at the time. What are the principles about how humans coordinate with each other that everyone would need to know to intelligently participate in their own sovereign self-governance? So they have to understand history and political theory and game theory and coordination theory and all those kinds of things. Now, you can see that most people don't have any sense in the US today that they are part of government at all. They will complain about government as if it's something out there, but if you don't participate actively in your own governance, you are de facto consenting to be ruled, right, by whoever it is that does show up to do that thing. So this is where the epistemic commons comes in, right? That was a quote about that the number one aim of the federal government has to be to support the integrity of the epistemic commons, the process by which everyone comes to understand things. So specifically, education and the fourth estate, the education by which people could learn how to think, could have enough basis in the understanding of how economic motives work and how coordination works and those types of things, where they don't come up with dumb propositions that have already been tried and figured out because they just didn't understand it, how rule of law works. That education has to be foundational. And the fourth estate is, what is the information about what's happening today that we're going to need to make choices on in an unbiased or bias corrected way, that the people have both the current information and the ability to process the information so that they can participate in deciding what are the right propositions and crafting propositions. Before the lobbyists, the idea was the people would actually craft the proposition in a town hall talking to each other, right? And so it's the education and the fourth estate are prerequisite institutions for democracy to work, or anything like a republic or an open society to work. If those erode, then you could not possibly have people participating in collective effective governance because they don't know how to think about the issues. If we ask average people in the US today about almost any of the issues that government is having to govern on, from a DOE policy on microgrid stability for the electrical grid, or nuclear first strike policy if an issue came with another nuclear equipped country or whatever, like, I've never even thought about those fucking things. I don't know.